Hi, I'm Dr. Pratyush, and we are going to talk about how alcohol intake is related to risk of developing high blood pressure. Alcohol is consumed by most of the human societies all over the world, and it is linked to celebration, social events, raising a toast, and things like that. People consume alcohol for different reasons. They find it fun, excitement, or a stress buster. A recent global study done by German researchers has found that alcohol consumption has increased by more than 70% in past 10 to 15 years. A similar Indian study has highlighted that alcohol consumption has increased more than 38% in past 7 years. While drinking itself necessarily is not a problem, but drinking too much can have its own risk. Now, defining too much of drinking is a difficult thing. So, how do you define too much of drinking? Um, and what is the link that alcohol intake can have on your blood pressure or heart diseases? So, studies suggest that chronic alcohol consumption, that is more than 3 units of alcohol per day, is associated with increased risk of developing hypertension and chronic heart disease. It has been shown that chronic ethanol consumption can increase your blood pressure by 5 to 10 millimeter of mercury. What are the mechanisms through which alcohol intake can cause blood pressure or high blood pressure? It is because alcohol has empty calories, so that itself leads to weight gain, and which is in turn a risk factor for blood pressure. And alcohol is an appetite stimulant, and the person ends up eating unhealthy food that is high in fat or salt. And if the patient is already on high blood pressure medicines, then alcohol can interact with the medicine and reduce its efficacy. So, next question that we come to is, how much of alcohol is too much? Global recommendations suggest that around 14 units of alcohol per week is recommended, but how do you define the units of alcohol? And apart from men, women metabolize alcohol much slowly. So for them, the recommended dose is 7 to 8 units per week. 1 unit of alcohol is defined as around 8 gram of ethanol. That could be equivalent, the 14 units weekly could be equivalent to, let's say, 6 pints of beer, 4% beer, or around 14 single measures of any spirit, or maybe 6 glasses of wine, around 13% wine. So, how do you stay in control of your alcohol intake? What are the steps that you can take? What are the measures that can be taken to limit your alcohol intake? So, one could try low alcohol level drinks, low alcohol concentration beverages like beers. One could also keep a track of their alcohol intake. Keeping a track of your alcohol intake, you could always read the label and know how much is the concentration that you're consuming. That keeps you, ahead of the things, and definitely helps in lowering the risk factor. And you could observe drink-free days. So that itself will bring you up to the challenge. You could start with having a couple of drink-free days over the week, and in turn you could start observing the positive changes that it brings to you. Also, uh, during the consumption of alcohol, during that time you should always watch what you are eating. So eating healthy, that should suppress your alcohol absorption, and you could always opt for eatables that are low on fat and low in salt. So one might be wondering at this point that my alcohol consumption is well below the recommended dose, that is the 14 units per week. So I might be in the safe zone. Absolutely, that is true. But I can still tell you that lowering your alcohol intake even further will definitely have positive results. Moreover, lowering the alcohol intake is just one approach of lowering your blood pressure or keeping it in check, or avoiding the risk of developing blood pressure. There are other factors such as healthy eating, lifestyle changes such as keeping your stress levels in check, and regular exercise, which can definitely help in lowering the risk of developing high blood pressure. Today, we are going to talk about something that puzzles many people: salt and hypertension. Indians consume almost the double the recommended dose of salt, as per a study done by Public Health Foundation of India. that found that Indians consume around 11 grams of salt per day. The recommended physiological need for the body is around 2 gram per day, and the recommended dose by WHO, World Health Foundation, is around 5 gram per day. So we are definitely crossing that limit by 5 times and more than 2 times. So how are they linked, the salt intake and blood pressure? How is it linked? So whenever there is high sodium consumption in the body, that tends to retain fluid in the extracellular space. That in turn leads to high cardiac output. This initiates some physiological changes in the body. The kidney starts excreting less water and starts retaining toxic fluids, and all these physiological changes result in increased blood pressure. Now, how is Indian diet and salt? I mean, they are so closely related. No Indian meal is complete without some chutneys and pickles and other additive things. Now, thing with these recipes is that they are salt is used in very high amounts for their preparation and preservation to give them that flavor. Now, and all these things are quite essential for us seasoning of an Indian diet. And there are most of the Indian snacks like saves and bhujiyas and namkeens and papads and whatnot. They are all high in sodium concentration for preservation and seasoning. So the question comes is, salt has been in use since ages. So why this fuss about sodium intake now? Why we have to worry about it so much now? So initially, millions of years ago, during evolution, salt never existed. So whatever the sodium, physiological need of the sodium was met with natural food intake. Few years down the line, sodium or salt was needed for preservation of food. So the Indian native salts started coming into use, like pink salt, black salt, rock salt, you name them. Those salts, they were used for the preservation of food, and they were native species of native salts of India, but they were always low in sodium content. Eventually, there was a shift from these native salts to refined salts, and the refined salts, they were low on minerals, high on sodium, and some of iodine. So they stopped serving the purpose of giving added minerals, and we never reduced the amount of salt that we were using, the table salt that we were using, and that transformed into high sodium intake with the consumption of table salt. So is there any proof that reducing the salt intake controls your blood pressure, reduces the blood pressure in a normal person or a hypertensive person? So yes, there have been few studies done. There was this very important study called DASH study. It was done on 412 patients, where they took both type of people in the study, normotensive, that is normal blood pressure people, and people with high blood pressure. Both these people were enrolled in the study, and they observed the patients over a period of time, and they reduced their salt intake significantly. What was observed in whatever the diet consumed by the patients was very closely observed in the study, and what came out of it was that both the groups with normal blood pressure and groups with high blood pressure, there was significant reduction in their blood pressure after reduction of salt intake. A similar study conducted in Europe showed similar encouraging results. There was a reduction of around 7 millimeter of mercury blood pressure in hypertensive patients, and around 3 millimeter in people with normal blood pressure, just with reduction of salt for 4 weeks in that study. So that gives us positive, concrete results that yes, reducing your salt, your sodium intake can result in controlled blood pressures, and even reducing your risk of developing high blood pressure if you are normotensive now. Now, in a nutshell, you should enjoy your food. I mean, it doesn't mean that you don't have to enjoy your food, but there are certain measures that need to be taken so that while you do that, the sodium intake you're able to watch your sodium intake and have the additional health benefits associated with it. So what are those? You could always opt for fresh fruits and vegetables instead of packaged and processed foods, because the packaged and processed foods needs to be preserved, and as a preservative, high sodium has to be added in it. Additionally, the nuts, the seeds, the legumes that we consume, we could always go for unsalted, the roasted options rather than the salted ones. You should always go for a low sodium salt. If available, you should choose you should read the label and opt for low sodium salt options. Similarly, low sodium food options. We always have options. We have to read the label and choose for something that is low on sodium. These day-to-day measures, and you can always enhance the flavor or the taste of food by using other herbs and spices instead of only relying on salt. So all these day-to-day measures can definitely bring down significant reduction in sodium intake, and thus helping you with reduction in your risk for blood pressure. See, the thing is, you can be a foodie. All you have to do is just watch your intake and stay healthy. Thank you.